Casey Bell, and you're watching Writer to Writer Interviews. It's time for another Writer to Writer Interviews. E.S. Danon is joining me today, and I hope you join us today. Let's take a listen at this interview. Okay, so my first question that I ask all writers that come to the show is, were you always a writer or always writing? Did you always have the desire or a goal to publish a book, or was this something that kind of just happened?
Yes and yes.
Oh, okay.
So I've been a writer since I can remember. Actually, one of my earliest memories of writing was in kindergarten. I had written this little picture book, and the teacher made me read it to the entire class. And ever since then, I was like, I want to be a writer. But of course, my dreams changed, and I went on a different path later in life. I went to school for marine biology, and I wanted to be this big marine scientist. But I ended up leaving marine biology after 2.5, 3 years, and I started working in IT. And throughout my whole life, I was still writing. I was writing poetry, but I never really thought I would write professionally or seriously until I was at this crossroads, and I was like, what am I going to do? You know, I don't know. I just left my dream of marine biology, and now I'm in IT, making decent money, but, what are my passions? So long story short, I started writing my book, Moon and Bastet. Then I just, one day I just started writing, and I never stopped. And I wrote a book before I knew it. So that's the long short story of Yes and Yes.
That kind of goes into my next question, because a lot of people desire or have goals to write books, but they talk about it, they never actually do it. And then there are people who are not giving, no one encourages them to do it, or they say, oh, just leave that dream alone. So I would say, even when you first said, okay, I'm going to start writing this book, what could you say was the pushing point that said you're going to, because it's one thing to say I'm going to do something, it's another thing to do it and to then complete the goal. So what were some, I guess, butt kickers that caused you to actually do this?
That is a fully loaded question, because there were a few. One of them was, leaving my dream job of marine biology. That put me at this crossroads. And also I had just gotten out of a relationship, and I was kind of in this state where I needed to do healing. I needed to heal myself, because it was such a rocky time in my life. And I thought, what better way could I heal myself than to write about my life's journey? Because one of the biggest butt kickers for writing the book was inspiration from my childhood, because I went through hell as a kid. If you read Moon and Bastet, I pretty much bring the characters through a symbolic journey of what I went through as a kid. And I pretty much motivated myself, because not only was I healing myself in my current state, but I was also healing, all the crap I went through as a kid. So I wanted to inspire people by healing myself. And to do that, I knew I had to write my story. So that was kind of my motivation. That's what kept me going. It wasn't anybody else, really. It was just what was inside of me, I guess, for a very long time. It just took that catalyst to get me to actually write it.
So Moon and Bastet, if you can, without spoiling it, giving any spoilers, can you explain to us generally what it's about? Short summary.
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, I bring the characters through a symbolic journey of what I went through as a kid. It's a fictionalized account of my memoir. So I write about this little girl. She's a little girl to me. Her name is Eva, but and Jack. They're the main characters, and they live in the Negev desert of Israel. And they basically, they're going through a really, really hard time. I'll put it that way. And then one day, both of them are just thrown into this magical fantasy world, and they discover, they discover magic itself, and they discover about themselves at the same time while getting away from the situation they were in. So it's very much about a story of self exploration and also self realization.
Okay. And what would you say would be the thing you want readers to get out of it as far as the message?
There's a few things I'd like the readers to take away from it. Firstly, I want it to educate people on Judaism in general, because that's very important to me. And that was kind of one of the things I discovered about myself, because I'm half Sephardic, so I'm a half Spanish Jewish. And, I wanted to educate readers that, there's religious Judaism and there's ethnic Judaism. And I wanted to also detail, some of the issues that are happening within Judaism itself, especially in Israel. It's not only what we're hearing in the news, in the mainstream. There's also oppressions happening, like with Jewish people. I mean, for instance, Jewish women, they're being religiously oppressed in Israel. Like buses were segregated between up until 2014. But I'm pretty sure it's even until today that they're still segregated. So I use the book to to educate people on that, as well as I wanted to give a message of woman empowerment, because that's very important to me, especially, as I said before, especially Jewish women, and in Israel and all over the world. And I also wanted to give a message of finding yourself and loving yourself, as well as loving other people and each other's differences. And also, there was a strong message of mental health awareness, which is portrayed through Jack. So there's quite a number of different messages in the book, for sure. But those are the main three.
Well, I know for a fact I know all over America, mm-hmm. certain Orthodox and Hasidic Jews mm-hmm. communities still segregate, because mm-hmm. One of the theaters I worked at is in a Orthodox Jewish community. And they would we have they call it a gallery, a small room inside the actual theater that they would use for their meetings. And we would have to set up the room so that there was I don't know what you want to call it, like a curtain, because the women sat on one side and the men sat on the other. And also we used to have this dance school do their dance recitals. And the only ones who were allowed to come see the show were the mothers, and then the daughters, and then sons 12 and under. But if you were a boy 13 and over, men weren't allowed to come see it, because they still have that segregation. And I I don't know why, because you don't find it anywhere in the Torah or the Bible or any of those scriptures. You don't see segregation, so I don't know where it originates, but they still do it to this day.
And that's, and exactly, you're exactly right. And, I don't per se have an issue with or the Orthodox community doing it within themselves, but when it spreads across in like an entire land, like and it affects other people of other, denominations of Judaism, for example, or even people outside of Judaism, that's where I draw the line. I mean, exactly that. Imagine that, but forcing everybody to do it, Orthodox or not. And that's what's happening in Israel, especially at the West. So the Western Wall in Jerusalem, it's one of the holiest sites in Judaism. And I mention it in Moon and Bastet. I bring the characters there because, I feel so strongly that women should have the right to pray and sing freely at this holiest place in Judaism. And, we have female rabbis and cantors that can't even hold service because the Orthodox have such control over everything in Israel. And that's, I'm okay with you, if that's your thing, fine. But when it comes to the whole state of Israel, or even, I basically the whole state of Israel, that's where I draw the line. Like, no, that's not right.
So I hope things change for the better soon, because it's definitely 100% wrong. So kind of off the subject, if you can, I always have a hard time asking this question because I know it's different for everyone, but explain to us your journey in publishing, because today publishing has changed and there really is no school yet or college course to teach you how to publish a book. And so I always wonder, how do people, once the book is published, what did you do? How did you know what to do?
So I had issues at first as well. I was a newbie, this was the first book I ever published. And I got lucky. I say I got lucky. Because I got picked up by a hybrid publisher, which is a mix between traditional and independent. But my personal journey, I had to do a lot of research to see what the different types of publishing companies were, and which ones to avoid. And I even looked at self-publishing. So there, with publishing, you're right, there is no class for it. There is no, you can't go to school and learn about how to publish, but you have to teach yourself. So Google was my best friend. And then it took me a few months. And I'm lucky. I really am lucky, because sometimes it takes years, or, it might not ever happen for some people. But what I did was I started following publishers on social media. And that was how I got in. I paid attention to when they had their open dates, and I actually didn't get a literary agent, which is, a step that many authors who do go the publishing route of going traditional or hybrid or independent, even a lot of times they need an agent. But Hearn, they didn't require that. So again, I lucked out, because it took me months of curing agents, and I didn't even get one. So I just, Hearn, she read my stuff, she liked it, and I got lucky. Again, it was very lucky. So
that's good.
Yeah.
So my last question for you, if you could co-author a book with any author, whether they be dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Oh, wow. That's, well, I have a few favorite ones, but my all-time favorite ever since I was like 13 is Edgar Allan Poe. I actually have a quote from his poem "A Dream Within a Dream" on like tattooed on my back. That's how like obsessed I am with him. So I would co-author a book with him. You know, even though he was mainly into short stories and poetry, but I don't care. I'd be like, hey Edgar, like Ed, you want to write a book? Let's go. I'll let you name the cat. The black cat or the crow, whatever, the raven, you can name it.
Don't you dare go anywhere. We are just getting started.
Filled with mystery, magic, and symbolism, Moon in Bastet is a story of resilience, survivorship, forgiveness, and women empowerment. Moon in Bastet. Written by E.S. Danon.
We are back for more enticing interview. Let's continue.
Let me ask you your questions then, because I saw a lot of cool books on here. So my first one would be, are you do you self-publish or do you have do you like do a number of different things? Like, do you have a publisher for some works and then self-publish, or how do you do it?
As of now, I'm 100% self-published. I started out, my church, this lady who came to my, well, she still goes to my church. She actually just recently won some office in November. I forget where, councilwoman. But this was back in 2006, I think. She invited a self-published author, Lalisa, I can't remember her last name, and she did a seminar on how to self-publish your books. And that was the very first time I actually knew that that existed. I never knew you could self-publish. So I obviously went, and I felt like this was the answer to my prayers, because when I started writing books, my first thought was, no one is ever gonna want to publish my stuff. So, and I did actually submit my stuff to a publishing company, and they said, basically, I don't remember word for word, but they said it's good, but you need work. And they sent me a flyer for classes that they teach, and I didn't have the money to pay for them, so I didn't do it. But so I said, well, then that means I'm never gonna get published. But so I went to this seminar, and I've been self-publishing ever since. I'm sure that was 2007. From 2007 to now, the self-publishing game has changed majorly. And so I've been on that route. I have been thinking about doing it as you did it, the in-between way. I don't want to do it the commercial way, because you just lose too much. You really, I mean, money, you lose too much control. You lose too much control of your schedule. Like, you're basically a servant of that publishing company. So I really don't want to go that route. But I have been thinking about one of my books doing it the in-between way at some point. I'm one of those people who, like, I don't want to try out the original way, because there's too many cons in my life for me. But I'm one of those people who, like, don't want to try something for a reason. I just want to try it just to see what it is for myself. So I do want to do it the way you did it, just even though I've heard a lot about it, I want to experience it for myself, just so I can experience it for myself. So one day I will go that route.
I definitely agree about the traditional commercial publishing groups. I've heard horror stories, so I'm very happy with, my route. And I do applaud self-publishers like yourself, because I mean, it's hard. I can't even imagine, trying to market myself. And I mean, I do to an extent, but to take the brunt of everything, it must be so difficult. So what are some of the ways that, like, what are some of the techniques you have for marketing your books? And, how has that changed with this evolution of self-publishing?
Yes. It's been highly difficult for me because there are two ways to market. One, well, there's many ways to market, but generally there's the money, you know, spending thousands of dollars, and then there's the free way, which is social media. I really don't like social media. Like, I think the reason why I don't like social media is because there was a time where I had an account with so many different social media platforms, even platforms most people don't even know exist. And I was updating I had like 10 or 15 pages I was updating 6 days a week. And I think I overdid it. And so now I'm at the point of I don't want to do anything. I don't have the thousands and thousands of dollars at the moment. So I have to find means that I enjoy doing. So one of the things I do is I drop shift my books. And so recently I've been doing it through Barnes & Noble, even though my books are available on Amazon, just because, how do I say, I'm trying to give Barnes & Noble some money because Amazon is basically the king of books. So I'm trying to say, okay, Barnes & Noble, here's my business. But basically I drop ship my stuff through eBay. So I put my stuff up for sale on eBay, and when someone buys it, I drop ship it. But then I send them a personal letter saying, thank you for purchasing such and such. It'll be coming to your door directly from, and I'll let them know, either Barnes & Noble or Amazon, whatever, so they're aware. And then I tell them, if you like my stuff, go to my website and blah, 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 blah. And so that is one way. Obviously, you can't make money on that because when you self-publish, it's not a contract, but it is a contract. The terms and agreements say you can't buy your stuff and then upsell it. So I can't actually make money off my stuff. Once I buy it, I have to sell it for less. So it's not making money, but my goal is to gain readers. And so I'm doing this to gain readers, not make money. And so that's what I've been doing mostly to market. I do other things, like I still somewhat do social media, but the way I've taken classes on social media, the things they say you have to do in order for it to work, it's too much for me. I actually just saw, I did a webinar and they said you should be spending 2 to 3 hours a day on social media. And I didn't even know what's his face. Instagram had it, but Instagram shows you how much time you've been spending. And the most time I've spent on Instagram was 11 minutes. And that was too much for me. So I really don't want to go past that. So I do social media because I feel like I need to, even though I don't personally think it's really working. But the drop shipping thing is what has been working mostly for me.
I don't even know about that. I'm so removed from, you know, that whole realm of things. But I mean, it sounds tough, but I think that's a smart, you know, way of doing things to gain readers. I kind of wanted to follow up with before. So why, you know, when you gain readers, do you think that you will, or I mean, not saying that you don't have readers now, but when you gain more of an audience, do you think you will go escape or break out of self-publishing, or like what's your plan for the future? Because I mean, every author wants to make money, right? So like
right.
how?
Well, like I said, the only thing, when I get the money, there is a company I'm thinking about using. Like I said, I want to see if they can sell more books than I've been selling. And I just want to see the experience. I want to feel the experience. I think the reason why I never did good in school is because I am an experienced person. Like even when I take webinars, I'm bored. Because if I'm not doing in that moment what they're telling me to do, I'm bored. Like I need to do it. And so I've heard, like you said, I've heard the horror story. Like I didn't even know the advance you had to pay back I'm like, what? When I first heard that, I'm like, I thought the advance was to keep you from going to another company. That's what I thought that was, to say, we're going to pay you to sign with us and to not you know, because sometimes people are offered 2 or 3 companies and they're not sure which one. So I just assumed the money was to say, come with us. I didn't know you had to pay it back. So that, and then like I said, you know, they basically have control over everything. You really don't get to do anything. So I know that's not a route I want to go, because I am very 100% stubborn, and I'm not one to compromise or negotiate. Because usually when I write, I'm not writing, I have a purpose for everything I do when I write. So if I write something, it's because I'm trying to make a point. And if you tell me you need me to change that, I'm going to have a problem with it, you know? So I know that's not a route I want to go. But I've heard a lot of people talk about the in-between route. And for me, I don't want to hear about it. I want to experience it. So I know one day that is a route I'm going to take, not because of anything other than I want to experience it for myself.
I think that's, you know, really a cool way of looking at things, the experience of it. The experience, yeah, cool way of, you know, looking at it. So my next question, actually, I want to focus more on your actual work. So I saw that you write a lot of different genres. You know, you have children's books. I even saw like a word find in there. I guess what are some of your inspirations, and how does that play in having all of these different works and different genres? Because I think that's really cool that you're able to write, you know, in such a wide range of areas, but, you know, what are the inspirations behind that?
That is definitely a difficult question, only because the very first book I published was fiction. And at the time I had another book I was working on. And in that moment in time, those were the only 2 books I thought I would ever publish. I never intended on publishing anything after that. But when it comes to my fiction, I will see something. Like one of my books, when I first moved to where we are now, I think there was only 2 or I think this was the second house that was complete. The other houses were being built at the time. And so I would be in my computer room working, but outside the window, I could see the men building the houses. And I remember just sitting there going, this would have been cool to watch when I was a little boy with my friends. And right there, that struck up my book, Crystal Fountain, which is about this boy who moves into these new homes, and him and his friend watches these men build homes. But then I actually wrote a story. It's more than that. It's a fictional memoir. And so it's stuff like that where things just happen and I'm like, oh, that's a book. The very first children's book I only wrote because one of my nieces is a book reader, and she was on my mother's bed reading a book. And don't ask me why, I do not know why, but I got jealous. And I just went, she should be reading one of my books. Why isn't she reading one of my books? And I didn't have children's book at the time that she could read, but I felt jealous that she wasn't reading. And I don't know why. So I said, I got to write a children's book so she could read one of my books and not someone else's who I don't know. And then the word search books, the first word search book, I just remember looking at a word search saying, I can do this. This looks easy. And I went, I think I'm going to make a word search book. And it was easy, but it was annoying and time consuming and frustrating. And I didn't really care for it. And I said, I'm never going to do it again. And I only did it 3 more times to prove to myself that I could do it, that I could discipline myself to do it. It wasn't even something I wanted to do. I just wanted to prove to myself that I can discipline myself to do something I don't want to do. And so most of my books, there is a story behind it, but none of them, like I said, I only planned to have 2 books written and published during that first book, and none of the other books were planned. It just, things were happening and I would go, oh, that's a book idea. And then I would put the book in action. And I never stopped and said, oh, wait, I can't do that book, because the first book I wrote was teen fiction. So I never stopped and said, oh, wait, I can only do teen fiction now because that's my first book. You know, it never. And then when I did my first nonfiction book, I didn't go, oh, wait, I only do teen fiction, so I can't do it. It never really dawned on me that I can't do anything else because my first book was teen fiction. I just, when something came up, I went, I'm going to do that. And that's why I'm now in so many genres, because I never told myself I couldn't do it.
This question doesn't count, but what's your star sign? Because
January 30th.
So you're an Aquarius?
I guess so. I don't follow.
I'm not too sure, but yeah. Because you're all over the place. You're like, I'm going to prove myself, you know, that I can just do this. And then I'm okay. Like, it sounds like you should read up on your zodiac, because I'm sure that it makes sense that it's like. But okay, so my last question, I wanted to talk about actually, you know, you as a whole, as a person, because you had mentioned that you also do art. I mean, some of your art's behind you, and the graphic design, and you're a writer, and then you work in theater. So what is like the method behind the madness? You know, what makes you like this creative person? What drives you?
What drives me? Good question. I think I mean, I could be 100% crazy and wrong, but I personally believe that everything that was here when I was born was created specifically for me so that I could do what I needed to do. I remember I was at church and we had like the special meeting, and the person who was teaching was asking everybody, what do you do? And when I was thinking about all the things I did, and she said, you can only say one thing. And I'm like, I can't, because I do so much, and everything that I do is under the umbrella of creator. So I said, I'm a creator because that's what I do. But I create either with words or I create with art, whether it's performing arts or fine arts or visual arts. But that's what I do. And I can't even say the one thing I create, like, and everything I create this, because most of the times I'll create a message to hopefully help the suicidal not commit suicide, or create a message to help the one who's being abused to speak up. But sometimes my art, I create it because I'm silly and I just want to see some silly art. I have this, and I don't even remember how I came up with it, but I have this art piece where you see these three little boys like in a pool, but they're not actually in a pool, they're on clouds instead. And I think what it was, I looked up at the sky and I saw these clouds and it looked at like a pool. So I imagined children playing in the clouds as if it was a river or ocean or a pool. So I created that art piece for the not a message, just because of the imagination, you know? So I am a creator, but everything I create, I say is like a child, because everything I create has its own conception story. Not one of my books have, or I write plays as well. I write poetry, I write songs. I create, like you said, behind me, art. Everything has its own conception story of how the creation started. And that is one of the things I noticed about, well, I didn't notice it until I was, the year before my last year of college. We had these assessments with the professors, and I had taken a tech theater class and a costume class and some other class, and all three of my final projects were not complete. And I ended up getting like C's or whatever. And one of the teachers said, do you notice how you don't complete stuff? And I was like, she said, you know, because even when I came in, she said, what do you want to do with your life? I was all over the place. I was like, I want to do this and I want to do that. I want to do this and I want to do that. And she said, you notice how you're all over the place and how you don't complete stuff. In your costume class, you didn't complete that. In the tech class, you didn't complete this, and you blah, blah, blah. And that really stopped me and go, she's right. And even now, I'm not as guilty as I used to be, but I've always been the person, oh, let's start this. And then when I guess it doesn't go the way I assumed it was going to go, I drop it, and then I start something else. And even though I'm all over the place, I'm still at a point where I'm trying to accept the fact it's okay to not stop at one thing, like not just to be a teen fiction author and that's it. There's nothing else you can do with your life. To not just be a playwright, that's all you can do with your life. To not just be such and such. And it's difficult for me because when I get an idea, I run with it. And I don't stop and say, well, I never completed A, so I can't do this yet. So I feel like I'm still in some ways rambled and all over the place. But then there's times where I feel like I'm at where I'm supposed to be, because even though it seems like I'm all over the place, my work is still organized. And I make sure, like I told you earlier, I have all my emails are separated, and I know when I'm working on one project, and I'm learning how to complete projects now and not just give up, even though it didn't go as I planned. And so I'm still myself trying to figure things out. I still don't know who I am. I still don't know what I do. I hate when people ask, what do you do? Like on LinkedIn, when they, LinkedIn is another social media I'm so frustrated with right now. I don't want to have anything to do with it. But people always ask, what do you do? And I sometimes just want to say, I'm an uncle, that's it. Don't worry about anything else, because I don't know what else I do. Yeah. And I don't, and because most people just say one thing, but I don't want to say one thing because it's not true for me. I'm still an artist. I'm still the fashion designer. I'm still a writer. And whatever part of me wants to create in that moment, I allow it to create. And so if I need to create art in that moment, I'll create it. I won't say, well, I'm a writer, so I can't create art just yet. I got to wait till I'm not writing anymore. And so I'd say I'm a creator of whatever needs to be created in the moment it needs to be created. And I leave it at that.
I think that's inspirational because a lot of people, like most people I know, they think they're one thing, one or two things, and I think that us as human beings get stuck in a mentality where, we can only do, this or that. We can't do this plethora of stuff that the world has for us. I think a lot of creatives like us, sometimes, for me, it's hard, just talking to you, it's like, whoa, I can do that, because I also paint and I write poetry and books, and then I do, I love biology, and I love all of these things, but there's often a war inside of myself. It's like, well, what am I? But hearing you say I'm a creator, like, that's it. It's like, okay, maybe I should take that approach, like.
That's how I had to see it, because like I said, when people would ask me, well, what do you do? I can't say one thing. And so usually I'll tell people, and I don't even say it all. I'll just say author, graphic designer, and fashion designer. But I still leave out playwright. I leave out poet. I leave out songwriter, because I am a ASCAP member. And I have published music songs, but I leave that out because I feel like it's too much. But because I already know when people ask me, what do you do? They're not asking because they want to know. They're asking because they're about to tell me what they do and how, what they can do for me.
What they can do for you. Yeah.
So I don't really give them all, because I know they're not asking because they want to know. They're just asking to start up a conversation so that they can try to get me to do their, because it's always people who do the digital coin trading stuff. So I know they're just asking to strike up a conversation, but I still feel wrong not telling them everything, because I don't do one thing. I've never in my life, even as a child, remember my first dream book that I made. I had to have been 12 or 13. And I said I wanted to be a gospel singer. I wanted to be a professional chef. And I wanted to be a sketch artist. So and that was my first, what do you want to be? So I've never in my life had it where I chose one thing, because I always felt like I don't even know where the idea came you can do it all. Because as children, you usually taught you can only do one thing. What do you want to be when you grow up? And they're expecting you to say one thing and one thing only. So I don't know where I got the idea that I could be three things all at the same time. But because I enjoy creating, I never limited myself. And I don't know why. I just never did. And so I just do it.
To have that mindset, it kind of actually reminds me of when I was in college. I remember telling my friend I wanted to do like 3 different things with my degree, and he was like, "What?" It's like, yeah, I want to, save sharks, and I want to be a doctor at the same time. Like, no big deal. Like, work on the ocean and then work in the hospital. Like, but, just like that. And then obviously, like, it changed again, and I still want to do everything. But, yeah, I can see exactly where you're coming from with that. So. But
are you still into marine biology?
Yeah, I am.
I mean, you could definitely write books on it, a book series. You can definitely go to, well, I don't know what you're allowed to do during the pandemic, but you can, if you're allowed to go to a beach or something and paint it, I mean, there's so much you can do with, like I said, college basically tells you there's only one thing you can do. And that's get a job and hate your job, complain about Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or hump day and Friday Eve. I mean, Wednesday and Thursday don't even exist anymore in America. And it's like, that's not true though, because we know that they always talk about Thomas Edison making a light bulb, but they never talk about the fact that he has over 100 different patents in 3 different countries. And so if he can do more than just be a light bulb maker, we can all do that. But they never taught that in school. They just taught he did this one thing, and it kind of made us think that there's only one thing we can do, and that's it. And it's just, when you look at successful people, they're never doing one thing only. They're always doing multiple things. And so I think we just have to learn how to do what we know is in our heart to do, the way we know we need to do it.
I couldn't agree more. And honestly, I think that, a lot of times when people try to limit themselves, which we're seeing, especially in today's society, people get depressed, anxious, because they're suppressing who they really are. But I think that, us as a, humanity is kind of evolving past that point. I feel like a lot more creatives are like coming forward, so it's definitely the time of the creatives.
Yes.
And that's what I call us. I just, creators, creatives, same thing for me. I mean, I think that you could be a lawyer and be creative in some aspect. I think you can find creativity everywhere. And yeah, so.
Thank you so much for joining me on another wonderful interview with another wonderful writer, E.S. Danon. Thank you so much for taking the time out to interview with me. And of course, the audience, thank you again for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and to share. We thank you very much. Have a great day.